Well, we've seen some people do, and we've seen it with even the MAGA fans we covered. Like, they took their money on these phones. They never gave them the phones. That's the old grift. But the national version is one you can't opt out of. So everybody suffers if he doesn't care about you. Barack Obama was talking about what has now been a big contrast. You know, there's a lot of discussion about Obama's foreign policy and how he operated and whether he was tough enough and whether they wasted too much time in meetings. And, well, a heck of a lot of Americans would rather the government was busy doing diplomacy if gas prices stayed low. Yeah, waste some time or tie up the Iranians in a bunch of meetings. So here was Obama on that contrast.
We went about trying to negotiate a diplomatic agreement that would get the enriched uranium out of Iran, that would assure that they could not get to a nuclear weapon. We pulled it off without firing a missile. We didn't have to kill a whole bunch of people or shut down the Strait of Hormuz.
Very few people thought foreign policy was going to predominate this year with everything else going on. And yet now this seems to be a contrast for the Democrats, and one where a lot of MAGA people have been sold. They have been told, let's stay out of these other places and these Mideast problems by their own side for years. Is this, in your view, something to focus on, or Dems should just still keep it on the economy part of it?
Well, I'm generally reluctant to criticize former Democratic presidents, but I'm going to criticize President Obama here. You don't brag enough, man. You had the agreement. They didn't have it, by the way, the Western Europeans on board, the Russians on board, the Chinese were on board, even the Iranians were on board. The problem was solved. Period. But went to Sherman and John Kerry, they ought to put a monument to him. But like anything else, in one flick, he gets out of it. He causes all of his problems. It's even more his fault than you imagine. This was a solved problem, and it would have stayed solved, and it was done through diplomacy with no loss of life and had international support. It was much better than President Obama. President Obama, listen to me, man, you got to brag more. You did a lot better job than you're giving yourself credit for.
Well, it's funny when you put it that way. And of course, he's mellow. He's famously mellow. So you don't get that full-throated pitch. I played some Rogan earlier, and it's interesting. I mean, you've always moved with the media. I see you doing podcasts. I see you on TikTok clips. Politics it runs through the conversation wherever people are having it. It could be at the diner, it could be at the barbershop, it could be online. And so Rogan, I want to play just something else he said, because he's proven so influential and he doesn't seem to be in the tank. Here's more Rogan.
Most people in America do not support this war. It's the large percentage of people think it was a bad idea.
What are your thoughts?
I don't think it's a good idea.
Why?
Because first of all, it doesn't seem to have a clear resolution.
Where does that fit in? Because he sounds very different than what you'd get as a Fox News viewer right now.
Well, he's not Fox. He's got a huge audience, and he tends to know what his audience wants. If somebody would tell me why Harris didn't go on his show in 2024, please give me the answer. I mean, the guy, he might not be the biggest policy wonk in the world, but he's got a huge following. And somehow or another, Democrats be, well, if I do that, that's popularism. I'm just trying to be popular. Yeah, try to be popular. The guy's popular. He'll listen to you. He'll give you a forum. Ask Jim Talrico. Well, damn it, do it. And I hope whoever runs, and I'm sure they will have enough sense to go on his show and go on other shows. Go on this show, go on Fox, go on anything. If you really got something to say, talk about a windfall tax on all companies to be rebated to consumers, and I guarantee you the Joe Rogan listeners will like you, and the Fox listeners will like you, and will the MS Now listeners like you.
For his 2-day state visit, and apparently he's so jet lagged that he's been sleeping at night and staying awake during meetings.
Not bad, James. That kind of fits with the other point I referenced, which is Trump hates that he's become allegedly Sleepy Dawn, that people talk about him the way they talked about Biden. And it is funny, if it were a movie and you got another elderly president, you had these problems, yada, yada, you'd say, well, it's a little too symmetrical. And yet here we are. Does that stuff matter in your view, or is that just kind of the scaffolding?
Look, everyone, and somebody goes their toes off. In fact, we used to say it was a good thing. It was power napping. All right. And then people were coming out and say this. I wish I could sleep more. I wish I didn't wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning throwing stuff at the wall. I can't believe this. So-and-so is still president. I'm so bad I got to get up and walk around. I'd give anything for a good night's sleep. All right. But he's sensitive about it. He's an old man. He's not in good health. He's going to doze off. Sometimes people in Olympic athletes doze off. I mean, supposedly I was always taught that it was a good thing to take up. If you're on a bus or a subway and you got 7 minutes, if you get 7 minutes sleep, that's a good thing. Nothing wrong with that. He shouldn't be so sensitive about it, but he is.
Trump has a problem that spans from domestic failures in the gas crisis to this trip he's doing as he faces a world that sees him as weaker and the U.S. as weaker than before the war started. 63% is where Trump's disapproval is, a number that's getting worse. The gas I mentioned, you already know. This is one of those news items you're living, but we'll show you where it is today and how much higher that is than before the war. 2/3 of Americans blame Trump for that. It all leads back to a decision to do things the Trump way. That meant by instinct rather than policy planning. It meant alone rather than with the United States Congress and an actual war plan that might have been improved by other minds being involved, or even the prospect of doing less than the full-scale war that has juiced gas prices and closed the strait. That was the Trumpian way. And now you have even people who like him some of the time and who say sometimes they like the Trumpian way, the bluster and the breaking of the rules. But this is one of Trump's most influential, maybe former allies, a person who has an audience larger than most news channels combined, Joe Rogan, taking on the war.
Here's what I don't understand. Are we getting oil from Iran?
No. That's
so
maybe 3 or 4% is from.
So are they just fucking us in the ass? Or is it global prices went up because some of the gas can't get to where it needs to go, and so they need to make that money, so they just Isn't it funny? Like, they're like, we're going to make money no matter what.
Yeah.
The American people are going to
100%.
lose money, so we make the same amount of money.
And also,
you need oil.
But one of the things that happened through that road of this MAGA era is people tend to overstate how much support and patience there is for Donald Trump. The truth is that while he's had his moments, he did win in 24. He is now the most unpopular president in a second term since we've been measuring it. And his failures, the corruption, the failure to fix the economy, the gas prices, the overall inflation, the war that's now open-ended and doesn't have a plan to reopen the strait, the Epstein files. This is more than most any president has dealt with, and he is now very, very opposed for it. And so if you're watching this going, gosh, I can't believe anyone ever voted for him, well, we've had that discussion. But if you're thinking, well, I can't believe anyone supports this, the truth is very few people do. We are talking about a historically unpopular, historically early rejection of Trump and what second-term Trumpism offers the American public. I want to bring in James Carville, who knows his way around these issues. Your view tonight.
Well, my view tonight on one specific thing, all companies had a windfall profit. It wasn't anything they did, and they didn't do anything bad, it didn't do anything good. Just as the price of oil goes up, their profits go up. People say the Democrats need to run on something. They need a plan. They need a message. Okay, how about this? Tax to all company excess profits and return it to people who purchase gasoline and energy. How about that for an idea? In other words, if you just sat there, you didn't do anything, and you made $500 billion, well, share $250 billion with the taxpayers, with the people that buy gas, and you get to keep $250 for yourself. But that's a pretty simple tax to figure out. It's a pretty simple tax to levy, and it's not that hard to get a rebate on it. So that's my message. Tax excess profits, give it back to the consumer.
That's fair. I mean, you look at from tech, which involves a lot of extraction. They call it value extraction. You say, well, if you've extracted it from the work that Americans have already done, the creative economy, you could regulate and tax that. And with the gas and these big companies that are, Wall Street's having a banner year while people suffer. So that's your point. I wanted to show you some of the Republicans that are now joining Democrats, at least in claiming they want to stand up on the war. It's late, to be clear, but Murkowski, Collins, and Rand Paul, who has made noise before, to be fair, and the Senate Democrats at least saying they want to back this resolution to end the war. What do you see there, and does that matter in the midterms?
Not yeah, but hell yeah. I mean, this war is going to matter big time. I mean, people, usually Biden had an excuse for inflation. As the pandemic winded down, they had supply chain issues. It took a while to catch up. He had an excuse. I mean, people blamed him, and that's okay. When you're the man in charge, you get blamed for everything. Actually, the rise in gas prices is 100% attributable to the actions that Donald Trump took. There's no other external factor. Usually you can muddle something up in politics and demand, supply, this, that. Okay, 100%. He starts a war, price of gas shoots up, consumers get squeezed. There's no need to complicate anything. And while I'm here, he said he's not concerned about the finances of the average American. That, Ari, as a lawyer, the highest form of evidence by far is an admission against interest. If you're sitting there with a smoking gun and a woman's on the floor and you say, I shot the bitch, that's real evidence. Okay? Because you're making evidence against you. When he says, I don't think about it, he's telling you the truth, and you know it because it's not in his interest to say that. And I was literally floored when I read that. Then I thought back and said, he really does not care. He understand that those fine people in Florida that were trying to fill up, and they were very passionate, and you could see they were in pain. He doesn't care about you. Get that through your head, and I think they do by now.
One thing that really stands out right now is how much the public conversation around Donald Trump appears to be shifting. For years, many supporters viewed him as a leader who would avoid major foreign conflicts while strengthening the economy at home. But lately, more people seem to be asking a difficult question. If the country is supposedly moving in the right direction, why does daily life feel increasingly expensive, unstable, and unpredictable? What makes this moment especially significant is that the skepticism is no longer coming only from Democrats or longtime critics. More conservative commentators, media personalities, and influential podcast hosts have started questioning both the handling of the conflict overseas and the economic consequences tied to it. Once those doubts begin surfacing inside traditionally supportive circles, the political dynamic changes in a major way. It stops being framed as partisan opposition and starts looking more like genuine frustration from ordinary voters. Rising gas prices, in particular, seem to have become a symbol of broader economic anxiety. Most Americans are less focused on policy debates in Washington and more focused on what they experience in everyday life: grocery bills, fuel costs, and financial pressure home. When leaders insist everything is under control while families continue struggling with higher expenses, that disconnect can quickly turn into resentment. Another factor that may be underestimated is how politically dangerous disappointment can become. Opposition from critics is expected in politics, but losing confidence among loyal supporters is far more difficult to recover from. And there are increasing signs that some voters who once defended Trump without hesitation are beginning to reconsider whether the overall strategy, both economically and internationally, has actually delivered the results they were promised.